Is my screen visible?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, so this particular kernel code snippet was discussed yesterday only. So just note, someone pointed out there was a problem here. So this should be V capital N, as you know, because the sum of all the column sums that is actually going to get populated in the last element of this V array. So, and apart from that, I think the semantics of atomics and overall the runtime complexity and all of those things were probably covered yesterday by Sir only. So today let me discuss a bit about the host code. So this program is already updated to that GitHub repository in HP3 lab. So you guys can just pull that again and accordingly play around with the code. Just a sec. Okay. Yeah. So for the host program, so typically what we generally follow is, so I think most of you would be familiar with the idea of running a program across multiple test cases and all. So which is why at the beginning we would have a variable like t, and then in here we would have a while loop with that decrementing variable, so that you iterate over all possible test cases and then try to run your code accordingly. But for the purpose of this example, we are just focusing on just considering one test input only. And if you recall, for that particular problem, we had two arrays basically, right? We had essentially an M matrix and a V one dimensional array. And the idea was that we would be essentially allowing each thread to actually perform a column sum and store that sum in the corresponding value of in the corresponding element of, say, the array V. And then once, say, if your matrix size is n cross n and your array V is size n plus 1, then at the n plus 1 at position you would essentially store the final total of all the column sums. Okay, so with that we just have two particular buffers here, this h input 1 and h output 1. We have a simple initialize matrix function which just initializes the matrix for test purposes. So I'm just like, you can use the random function, but for here I've just used an incrementing value of I only starting from 0. And then you have the traditional CUDA malloc, then you have CUDA mem copy. Then here you essentially have two options. So if you recall, we had two versions of the same kernel, right? One which used atomics and one which did not use atomics. So if that's the case, naturally I had to introduce a Boolean flag, so that depending upon what option you set, either some triangle or some triangle with atomics would execute. And in order to profile the execution times of this particular kernel, we use something called CUDA event record. So now in order to understand that, we need to understand a bit what CUDA events are and what do you essentially mean by a stream and what do you mean by a default stream. So I think Sir gave a basic idea of what a stream is. So maybe I can just pictorially show you how that actually looks like. Hold on a sec. So can you see what I'm drawing here?
Yes, sir, it's visible.
Okay. Okay, so let us try to understand what is essentially happening in this program. So this particular program, so it essentially uses one CUDA memcopy, one kernel, and finally another CUDA memcopy. Now naturally, all of these, if I think of these as individual operations which are essentially being dispatched by your host program to the corresponding GPU device, so that essentially means that there is an operation that is going to be essentially, so this CUDA memcopy operation essentially corresponds to this W operation, or say write. This kernel operation corresponds to this operation Eve, standing for execute, and then this final CUDA memcopy operation stands for this read, which is represented by this symbol R here. Any operation dispatched by the host program to the corresponding GPU device in question is actually done by enqueuing these operations into, say, some sort of worker queue. So generically speaking, it's called a worker queue. In the context of CUDA programmings, we call this a stream. So what you can think of is essentially a stream is a FIFO queue of operations where the operations are just write, execute, or read. Okay. Now, in your particular code, you have this CUDA memcopy kernel and CUDA memcopy. Now, by default, CUDA memcopy is essentially a synchronous function. So now we need to understand a bit what do you mean by a synchronous function here. So a synchronous function essentially means that when the host program is, say, executing CUDA memcopy, it would wait for that particular copy operation to finish, and only then would it proceed to the next line of the code. Okay. Similarly, for kernel, here there is a parameter internally. So you already know that you specify grid, you specify blocks. Apart from that, you can also specify a stream. Okay. So a stream is again a CUDA stream object. So I can create a stream object and specify that. If I do not specify anything, that essentially means that you're using the default stream. Okay. The default stream is synchronous by nature. That means whatever operation is being enqueued here, the host actually has to wait for that particular operation to finish. Okay. Once that operation has finished, only then can it proceed to the next line of the code. Okay. Now, another alternative could have been like, what if you really wanted to have a bit of asynchronous execution involved here? So by asynchronous, I essentially mean that the host job is to just enqueue these operations and continue executing the remainder of the host program. It will essentially not wait at this particular point. So if I again have a look at the code here, you essentially have this CUDA memcopy. So imagine I'm doing a dry run of this code. So the code is now at this particular line. So essentially it will wait for this particular H input 1 to be copied to D input 1 completely, and only then would it proceed to the next line. Now, there are options of essentially using another variant of CUDA memcopy called CUDA memcopy async, where as an argument you can actually provide a stream. Okay. Now, this guarantees asynchronous execution. So that essentially means that if you use CUDA memcopy async here, the host job is to essentially just push the corresponding write operation into that worker queue or stream, and then immediately it would move on to the next line of the code in your host program. It would not essentially wait for that particular copy operation to actually happen. Okay, but these things will be covered a lot more in details. For now, think of it that you have a default stream. Okay, this CUDA memcopy function is a synchronous function being enqueued into your default stream. Similarly, you have this particular sum triangle kernel operation. And finally, at the end, you have another CUDA memcopy operation. Now, the question is, you want to actually record the time taken for your kernel operation to finish. Okay, so in order to do that, what we basically do is there is an object called CUDA event underscore t. We essentially create that using CUDA event create. Okay, and then we use this CUDA event record function to actually start it. Okay, so for example, say I want to use a sequence start and sequence end to actually record push markers that would actually record the timestamps for this particular kernel. Okay, so pictorially, this essentially means that say you want to profile this particular function here. Sorry, this particular execute operation here. So you would essentially try to place markers at these two particular positions. So, and the way you can actually place a marker is by using this CUDA event record function. So there will be a CUDA event record call here. There will be another CUDA event record call here. The arguments are basically the events that you have created. So you have one event created for noting the starting timestamp, and you have one event created for noting the ending timestamp. This second argument here typically refers to a particular stream object or a stream ID. Since we are only focused on default streams at the moment, this is always 0 for our purposes here. Okay. And once that is done, you place a CUDA event synchronize on the last marker that you have placed. Okay. Note, the operations are synchronous in nature, but as per the programming guidelines, whatever you specify using CUDA event records, ensure that you want to synchronize this particular ACQ end or sequence end here, just to ensure that, okay, you've essentially are finished with the corresponding kernel execution operation. Okay, and then later on, you can actually use another function called CUDA event elapse time. So this is nothing but you take a floating point variable. Okay, you pass the address of that as the first argument, and then you pass the corresponding event counters. Okay, so the corresponding event objects that you had created, and accordingly, it will then try to calculate the duration of time between these two particular events. Okay, so anybody having trouble following up till here?
Can you repeat what the 0 was in the?
Okay. So are you now clear about what a default stream is? Hello.
Yes, sir.
So this 0, so essentially the second argument for your CUDA event record essentially denotes the stream ID. So you could have had an operation where you were, say, using multiple streams. So you can now fairly understand that streams can actually enable asynchronous execution, right? So you can essentially have a program with, say, multiple streams, and your host, you can design a host program which asynchronously enqueues these operations to each such stream, right? Now, but we are not going into that. We are only focused on the default stream here. So all the initial code snippets that we are going to discuss here in the beginning assume that every operation is being passed to a corresponding default stream only. Okay. So as I had mentioned, for your sum triangle operation here, if say you wanted to dispatch it to a particular stream, then in the arguments here only, just after specifying grid dim, block dim, so you can actually specify something called stream underscore t object, notifying that, okay, you want to dispatch it to a particular stream. Okay, but by default, if you do not specify anything, so that actually the runtime system assumes that it is set to 0, which essentially means that it is set to the default stream. That is the specific reason why the second arguments of your CUDA event record functions that I've used here, they would also have 0 only. Had you used another stream object, then you would have had to pass the stream ID or a pointer to the stream object directly here. But since you're not using that, passing an integer value of 0 only suffices here. Okay. Does that answer your question?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay. So,
Uh,
yeah.
Sir, I had a doubt in like, can you show the code again?
Yes.
In this, why like I understood why we are doing this CUDA event record sequence start and sequence end for kind of noting the times. What does this CUDA event synchronize sequence end
All right.
does?
So essentially, if you look at the program here, so CUDA event synchronize, you can think of it as a synchronization point in the sense like, say you have these operations, this write, execute, right? If you specify CUDA events, you actually specify CUDA event synchronize for sequence end here, right? Which is essentially this second orange line. Now, CUDA event synchronize essentially ensures that any other operation that has been pushed before this particular CUDA event record, they finish. Okay, so it is kind of a synchronization point here. Despite the fact that your corresponding stream is by default synchronous in nature, it is the way the corresponding event interface has been designed that you actually, even if you use a synchronous default stream, you would still have to use this CUDA event synchronize function so that your corresponding timestamps are recorded. Okay, so in fact, yesterday when I was trying to implement this, if I miss out on this particular line segment, sorry, in this particular line, then essentially it is not recording anything. It will just give you a value of 0 every time. Does that clear your question?
Yes, sir. So, but do you know the reason why does it give like, because since the values get stored before when we do code event record, right?
Mhm.
So why is this synchronized thing necessary? I understood that kind of it is kind of a nice practice to make sure that all the events which are pushed before are covered, but why is it necessary? As in, like, since the values have already been recorded, so if we omit this line, why do the values come as 0?
No, the thing is, you are just placing those markers. Okay. But the finally, this CUDA event synchronize kind of triggers the function calls necessary for copying the corresponding timestamps that have been recorded. Okay. So try to understand here. CUDA event record does nothing but place markers here. Okay. Internal to this particular set of comments that you've enqueued into your command queue. Okay, it is not directly recording the timestamp then. Probably internally some low level function is recording that, but you do not really have access to those timestamps directly from that point. Okay, CUDA event synchronize essentially ensures that you get those timestamps. Okay, they are placed into these CUDA event T objects, and then finally using CUDA event elapsed, you are essentially able to get a hold of those particular values. Is this clear now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Does
Excuse me, sir, I have a question.
Sure.
So in this function, right, CUDA event record sequence start,
Right.
and then CUDA event record sequence end. So between that, you are calling that kernel on the device, right?
Correct.
So during the time when that kernel is executing on the device, so is the host in blocking mode? I mean, it always waits for that kernel to return, or can it continue?
Yeah, yes. So that is what I said. So when you are considering the default stream, essentially that means that whatever CUDA memcopy operation or whatever kernel operation you essentially use, you actually wait at that particular point in the host program. Okay. Had you used another non-default stream and use those async component operations, then you actually had the option of the host asynchronously just dispatching this particular operation into your command queue, and then it can proceed with doing something else. But naturally, if you do that, then you naturally have to define some sort of global synchronization point in your code, because what would happen is these operations, they continue executing on the corresponding device, but you would not really know when that particular operation finishes on the GPU device. So naturally, then so CUDA event synchronize is again another good thing that you can actually use here. So for example, say if I had an asynchronous variant of this program where all the CUDA memcopy operations and say all the kernel operations, they were async in nature, then in order to ensure that you want to synchronize across the operations in one particular stream, then for the last operation that you include, you would then try to record an event right after it, and then you would call upon CUDA event synchronize so that it waits at that particular point. Does that
Yes.
answer your question?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, any more questions regarding events, event records, streams and all? Hello?
No, sir.
Okay then, so we'll be posting a few assignments for you to practice within a couple of days. And I guess you guys have the corresponding exam on Monday only. So has sir mailed anything till now regarding what is going to be there on the test or not?
No, sir.
Hello?
No, sir, I don't think anything has been posted yet.
All right. Okay. So I would suggest then you have you ensure that all your Moodle accounts are created and the corresponding.
Sir, I just viewed there is no HP3 course on Moodle.
There should be there. Like I only logged in today. Did you check CSE Moodle, not Institute Moodle?
Achha, sorry. I checked the institute module. It is on CC module.
Yes.
Sir, can you tell how to add this course in the CSC model?
Okay. Let me then just check. Just a sec. So I've given the link for Moodle CSE in the chat box. So is there anyone who has never used Moodle CSE?
Me.
Oh, okay. So then for you, you'll have to create a new account. Okay, so just log in there, create a new account.
Excuse me, sir. Everybody uses it for PDF.
Now, I'm not sure because sometimes people now use Institute Moodle instead of CSE Moodle. Like a few years back, everyone used CSE Moodle only, but for newer people, I've seen that they've kind of shifted to your Institute Moodle logins only.
Yes, sir. Last semester also we used Institute model only.
Yeah.
Here we need to create a new account, right?
Yeah, I think so. So then I would suggest you guys first create a new account here. So I don't think it will take up much time. So because it is fairly straightforward. There is an account form, an email, and then okay, you will get a confirmation email, and accordingly you will just confirm that, and then you will be logged in into the course. And then it's a matter of just finding that particular course there. So let me just see if I can get a hold of that. Hold on a second.
So will you be posting any tutorials or anything on the CSE Moodle?
So tutorials, we will exclusively use the tutorial channel on Teams only.
For regarding the test, because we don't know what pattern it will be. So can you give some look into
Yeah,
that?
yeah. So maybe I can. So essentially, questions would be either MCQs or fill in the blanks. Okay. So you would get a corresponding submission form there. All right. Inside that submission form, if you click on that, so it will be very straightforward. Like you will just, if for the MCQ questions, you will have those options. For fill in the blanks, you will have suitable check boxes. So, but first, we'll have to ensure that all of you kind of log into this CSE Moodle and get a hold of that. So just 1 second.
Sir, in the email field, can we give the personal email or the institute email?
I think that won't really matter, because anyways we'll be, for evaluation we'll be just looking into whatever you submit on Moodle only. But I think while creating the profile, like after your profile is created, somewhere you have to provide your roll number. So does anybody from who has used CSE Moodle know this?
Yes, any email is fine. And regarding the email, you can see it as soon as you log in. There's an instruction on what to do.
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
Because I'm also using Moodle after a long period of time. So let's see.
So, but I think the email functionality isn't exactly working. It didn't work for one of my classes. Because I'm not sure 100%. So I think Durga sir had to check into that or something. I'm not sure exactly.
Okay, you try. Do you have an account, or hello? Do you already
Yes,
have an account, or?
I have an account, but the other ones who are making an account.
Right. I understand. Okay, but I hope that won't be a problem. So
Okay,
for
sir, I
people
have
who,
signed up
Mhm.
and yeah, I am inside.
Okay,
So
you're
that email
inside.
worked. Yeah.
Okay, then it's fine. So just a sec. Let me just share my screen and.
Sir, will we be able to navigate in the questions? Like, can we return to a question if we have skipped it?
I think there would be options for that. Like it won't be like once you submit something, it will
It
get
is
locked.
disabled.
Hello?
Sometimes it is disabled, so we can.
So it is basically said by the
Hello.
TAs and the professor. So
Yeah, then if you, okay, then for someone who has actually given this particular test, like any test on this CSE Moodles sometime earlier, then can you then post like what all issues you guys have faced? Maybe we can have a small discussion on that here. And then accordingly we'll try to accommodate all of those settings. Also, can you see my screen? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yes.
so I think you will be able to see something like this the first time you log in. Okay. Then if you click
Yes.
on spring semester, it should be there at the very beginning, this high performance parallel programming. Note, it's not high performance computer architecture. It's parallel programming. Okay, now I have already logged in, but as far as I remember, the moment you click on this, so you will see two options, one for enrolling students and one for enrolling TAs. So naturally you will enroll as a student here, and there is a text box for providing the corresponding key. So that is the key that I posted on this chat. I also float another general announcement regarding that. Okay.
sir, where we have to put our roll number?
So that essentially would be somewhere in your profile settings.
Sir, it
Left
wasn't there.
side, that administration tab is there, right?
Instruction on what
So
to do. Just
inside that, edit profile,
Edit
my profiles.
profile. There is something called optional, and there is an ID
Oh,
number in optional. That would essentially be
yes.
your roll number.
Yes,
Please,
correct.
I would suggest everyone that you fill this up, because accordingly, when we are going to evaluate it, it's going to be like the corresponding database that's going to be created. It would be keyed on your roll number only. Okay, so everyone place your roll number in this ID number here. Okay, and also regarding the pattern of questions, as I said, it would be MCQs and fill in the blanks. Okay, so probably some conceptual questions and some say incomplete programs where we would ask you to either fill in the blanks or say correspondingly we can give you options and accordingly ask you to choose the correct option for one particular fill in the blank. So the pattern of questions would be that in mind. Okay, so but someone said that okay, sometimes like you have faced in previous tests where that particular option gets disabled. Is that it? Like you answer one particular question and then you are unable to go and revise that answer? Somebody was saying that. Has anybody faced this issue before?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Sometimes some professors actually make this so that it can stop cheating.
Oh, okay. Mm, okay, then I won't really have much of a say. That would essentially be dependent upon Somojit sir's preference only. But I'll forward this particular concern to him regarding this like corresponding option of whether we should allow lock like questions to get locked or not after getting answered.
Excuse me, sir.
Oh,
After,
hmm.
after doing the MCQs, do we need to upload our solutions like in a paper, pen and paper?
No. So essentially, it would be like normally you have those checkbox buttons and those text boxes, right? So essentially, for every question, I think you would get a corresponding submission button. So once you've clicked on that, that essentially means that you've actually submitted it. So you won't need to again like take a pen and paper, scan and upload it. That's not going to happen. Okay. So anyways, I'll have a word with sir. I think probably it would be best if we have a short dummy test on that beforehand and then just to check with Moodle. And probably we'll just say one or two questions and just check whether it is working correctly or not. So I'll have a word regarding that with sir. Okay, so does anybody else have any more questions? Regarding say Moodle logins or say anything pertaining to the tutorial?
What will be the duration of the test?
It would be, I guess, somewhere around 40 minutes. Since it's a short test, we leave it would be sometime from say 5:10 to 5:50 or something like that. That will accordingly be notified, don't worry. But it won't be the full 1 hour. Since it's a short test, it will be less than that definitely. So does anybody has like have classes on Monday right before 5 p.m.?
Yes, sir, we have lab.
You have lab. Okay. Then probably it would be best if we start from sometime like 5:10 only, not directly from 5. But you also take care that you join no more later than 10 minutes. Okay. Like tell the corresponding professor and all that you have a test and accordingly come. Okay then. So if there is nothing else to discuss, we can then leave it here. We'll accordingly. Yes.
We don't need to join the Teams meet, right? Monday directly we can log into Moodle and give the test.
Directly you can log into Moodle, but sometimes what happens is like we generally float a dummy kind of a meeting then kind of like if anybody is facing any particular issues, then he or she can directly ask us in meets only and then we can help diagnose that issue. But if you don't have a problem or anything, there's no point in joining that. That's it.
Right, sir. Okay.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay then, so we'll end today's class here then, and accordingly I'll have a word with sir and float all the corresponding announcements soon. Okay. You all ensure that the corresponding Moodle accounts, they have all been created and that you have entered your roll number in that ID number section that I showed inside that user settings under that options tab. Okay. So just keep that in mind. So maybe in that students thread only, I'll post this student key, and then if anybody has any issues logging into Moodle, they can reply to that particular thread there. Okay.
Yes, sir. Fine.
Okay then. Take care. Bye.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.